Welcome back, everyone. Well, as many of you know, we've been delving into a lot of topics regarding income inequality in our community. And one of the central pieces of discussing that has to do with housing. So we asked two experts to come in and delve into this topic a little bit more in our community. And joining me today is Bob Landry, who is the Executive Director of the Glens Falls Housing Authority. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Jesse.
And Paul Hancock, who's Chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you here.
Nice
Quick
to be here.
sidebar, 15 years. Bob and I were doing the math. We met 15 years ago.
It's been a good 15 years.
Yes, it has. And when I
years.
met you, you were Executive Director of the Housing
Just
Authority.
to become the Executive
Yes,
Director.
I know. So
Absolutely.
You've had this job for a long time. It takes a certain kind of person to have this job, Bob. A lot of passion for the community, interest in the community. Just kind of frame for us what you see in that job.
Right. Jesse, to be honest with you, I worked in the private sector for 25 years before I came to work for the Housing Authority. Always had a passion for the poor, those in need, and the Housing Authority really kind of gave me a vehicle to be able to continue my business career and do some good at the same time. The community is in need of some sort of an upgrade in its affordable housing that it has. We have 306 apartments. They're 40 years old. The government just isn't there like it used to be, and we're right at the moment investigating some public-private partnerships to try to generate some money so that we can take the existing housing stock and make it better.
And I want to delve into that. There's a lot of particulars about this and the way the funds are distributed and how the restrictions on the funds or the way the cutbacks are affecting the things that Bob was just mentioning. Paul, from your perspective, you see this as a real issue in the community, don't you?
Absolutely. I think that there is a housing question that has been addressed for a very long period of time. There's a clear relationship between the level of poverty and the level of housing insecurity, and I think we've reached a point where we have to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, sure, I bet. You know what? I think it was in the late 30s a public housing authority was formed, right?
Right.
Then we saw a real steady increase in the way it was supported at the federal level and at the state level. Long about the 60s and the 70s, the growth started to slow down. You were saying to me in the 80s it started to dry up.
Yes. And Bob would, I think, concur with this, that the money available to construct new public housing ended for the most part in the 80s and early 90s, and it turned from a supply-side approach to the housing problem to a demand-side approach. And so vouchers and Section 8 housing subsidies were what the government provided local municipalities. And I think that for the most part has failed in providing people with affordable housing. And as I think I mentioned before, the percent of housing costs as a share of people's family budgets has been going up, particularly for the bottom 20% of income recipients in the country.
Well, you know what? We've got two issues here. We have an issue here where I think they were saying that, if you spend more than 30%, tell me all of us can't relate to this. You spend more than 30% of what you make a month, net money, on housing, you're crossing over. You're going into a critical area. Now, when you say that 30% on housing, that's not food, that's not clothing, that's not, that's shelter. And you were saying something to me, Bob, that stuck in my head, that generational poverty kind of, it plays a role in here. That if you think about public housing, you're thinking about giving someone the ability to provide for their family, in a lot of cases single moms, single parents with children, generation after generation, trying to break the cycle of poverty, right?
And that's exactly true. And to be very honest with you, this is an issue that's all about poverty. Housing is a large component to everyone's living standards. The government says that you should be able to pay 30% of your income towards your housing. Most people can't find housing and have it be just 30% of their income. So a larger percentage of their income goes towards their housing, and now they have issues with, well, I can't get daycare, so I can get care for my children, so I can go to work, so I can get out of this subsidy that I get from the government to do my housing. So to me, it's all about trying to figure out the root of the problem with poverty in this country. and then in my end of it, take that and try to see what we can do best with the dollars that we've got to address those issues, especially here locally.
Boy, I see that. Would you agree?
I would agree completely. I think there's, as I said before, there's a connection between people's income levels and their ability to afford housing. I think, I don't think, and I think you would agree with me on this, I don't think people choose to be homeless. I think they're homeless because of circumstances that are in part to do with the way we've decided to address the housing question, and that's the single-family home.
Well, you know what? And, as a society, it's what we're creating as our priorities.
Right.
You know, I was in an interview just recently that maybe you saw. One day away from a crisis. You know, you tend not to think about this. We get absorbed in our own worlds. But when you think about the well-being of a community, then you realize there are a lot of different needs, a lot of people at a lot of different income levels. And some of those people could be one day away from a crisis. They lose their car, they get sick, something happens to their child or something like that, and the next thing you know, they can't pay a rent. Now they can't pay rent because the priority wasn't set up in the community to make affordable housing and support it at the federal and state level.
Right.
You know, it's an issue that I think that we should all be aware of. A very interesting symposium that's happening at Crandall Library this Saturday.
At 2:30 p.m. in the Holden Room of the Crandall Library. Bob will be there. There will be other people interested in the housing question and the affordability of housing in the Glens Falls region who will be there as well. We want to have a discussion, a roundtable discussion about the kinds of solutions that we can bring to the issue.
Oh, I hear. Yes. You know, someone has just said to me recently, really stuck in my head. You know, they said, you know, if you talk about poverty, then you need to talk to the experts, the people in poverty. You know,
absolutely.
And that kind of sticks in your head. You know, no doubt about your dedication. 20-something years you've been involved in this. You've seen everything, Bob, and you've adjusted accordingly. But the need is there, and the need is there in our community. 2:30, Crandall Public Library in Glens Falls this Saturday. Bob will be there. Paul will be there. We're covering it, by the way. And learn more about this situation. It is, when we contribute and we're aware, then it's really to the betterment of the community, which lifts everyone up. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for taking the time to come in.
Thank you, Jesse.
Appreciate it. Bob, great
Thanks,
to see
Jesse.
you again, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.